Should we consider photography as an art form? What makes it more than just the product of precision engineering, a scientific marvel of optics and chemistry that can freeze a fraction of a second in time with startling accuracy? Well, for the next 14 minutes or so, prepare your expectations to a very low standard as we explore why photography is an art form. Well, what makes a photographer? Someone with a camera, you might say? But Ivan here, does he look like a photographer? Yes, he does. But is he a real photographer? The simple answer to that is no. Ivan doesn't actually know what photography is, as he is a raccoon. Moving on from Ivan. What really makes a photographer? Well, that is something that I want to find out throughout all my research. And after doing a little digging and scrounging around the most terrible of environments, the library and the internet, some of the things that stood out to me quite a lot were the basic definition of a photographer is a person that takes photographs either as a job or hobby. And come on, Cambridge Dictionary, you can do better than that. With that being said, the simple definition for what a photographer is. What is the definition of an artist? Well, according to Britannica, an artist is something that is created with imagination and skill and that is beautiful or expresses important ideas or feelings. With those being the definitions of photography and art, I went and asked an old lecturer of mine, Matthew Sowerby, what he thought made a photographer. He got back to me with this quote, which I would try and read out, but after 20 failed attempts, you can read it yourself.
Editing Calm here. I didn't leave long enough to read it, so if you really want to, pause the video.
Now moving on from that fantastic quote, I want to talk about another one that's quite interesting from a book called The Social Photo. It says, to say someone has photographed something sounds weightier than what most people do in their everyday practice of making and sharing images. Many people with a phone and camera app do not consider themselves a photographer at all. This designation evokes art and more final documentation. Yerkes has a very good point on how people in the modern age might view taking a photograph. When talking about contemporary artwork and how photography is included within this, it's also important to look back on what photography was and how it has evolved over time. And now we get onto the good stuff. The teenage goth years of photography, when well-respected artists and photographers alike, Alfred Stieglitz, Edward Steichen, and a bunch of others that I can't remember their names, would go and try and take purposely bad photographs to make them look like paintings. And at the same time, all of the painters were trying to make their paintings look photorealistic, which makes no sense. The 1900s were a very weird time. To start with, we're going to cover pictorialism. Pictorialism dates all the way back to 1869 with Henry Peach Robinson's publication of Pictorial Effect in Photography. And this book was created by him to show the difference between photography as science compared to photography in an artistic form. Two pieces of work I would like to talk about are one by Edward Steichen of the Flatiron and one by Alfred Stieglitz of the Flatiron, both taking very, very different images of the same building. What we can see between these two images is, well, today these would be seen as bad, blurry, not conventional, maybe more of an artistic approach taken to them. But what we really see is a man that took it in the snow, and it's a very nice white, crispy, cleaner image. But the other one is also dark, it's clearly raining. It's a bit more atmospheric and moody and, well, yeah. But what they were both trying to go for was this painterly look, which in some aspects works, but in others, it doesn't. In their case, of course it has, as they are two of the most well-known photographers, so you can't knock them for whatever they've done, even though it might be pretty dumb sometimes, like taking blurry photos of a building, but each to their own. I'm not one to judge. But overall, their influence on the photographic industry at the time was unparamount. The movements that they created were so well known throughout photographic history and are still taught to this day because of how influential at the time they were. Another important and influential movement within photography was surrealism. Surrealism came about after World War One, and it was a way that artists could create work that was unexpected, unconventional, or just downright strange. Some of the best examples I can find of great surrealist work is by people like Quemado, who is a Spanish photographer, who uses simple techniques and simple images to confuse your mind. Like this picture of a ladder. Is it going through a wall? Is it a window? Or is it going into a mirror? It is one of the many, many images that this man creates that gets you to think and to really have to stop and look at the image. And this is where photography has the advantage over conventional art. Where conventional art, it might take someone hours and hours of painting to create something like this. All this man needed to do was to get a ladder and a mirror to capture this image. A quote from John Berger from his book Understanding a Photograph defines the feeling of surrealist photography perfectly. A photograph is not necessarily a lie, but it isn't the truth either. It's more like a fleeting subjective impression. Is what you see the truth, or is it a lie? One could say both, but like in the quote, it's a fleeting subjective impression. Once your attention has been drawn in, you must consider the point of view of the photographer and why he's chosen to make this image. Why is he chosen specifically to place a ladder on a mirror to make someone have to stop and think, what am I viewing? Is it telling me the truth? Or is it lying to me? Another fantastic surrealist image by Philip Halsman and Salvador Dali called Enduring Partnership is another amazing way of showing what surrealism is. You have a man jumping, an easel floating, chairs going everywhere, cats being thrown, water gushing everywhere. It's a moment frozen in time, but it's so unrealistic, but real at the same time. Like, the amount of time and effort that must have went into getting everything prepared, it's astounding. And now to move on to another part of photography. The rise of photography in contemporary art. And this is an interesting one, because photography already has this genre called fine art photography, which, for all my lack of knowledge, is just another way to make it sound more impressive than it actually is. There's nothing different to a fine art photograph than to a normal photograph that someone takes. But that's also just my opinion. Opinion aside, fine art photography is a style of photography that's more about just taking a picture of what's in front of you. It's about creating more than a moment in time. Some great examples of fine art photography are with people like Cindy Sherman, Andreas Szarkowski, and many, many others. But Cindy Sherman's work, especially her untitled film stills, are a great way to look at fine art photography. Every single one of her stills looks like it could have came out of a film. Everything from what she's wearing, to the camera angle, to the position, to the way that it's been shot, to why the image has been shot. It's all thought through, and every single bit of it is done on purpose. There's no error, there's no accidental, oh, that turned out really well. Especially when you look back and everything being on film, they had to get it right. And another person whose work is amazing is Andreas Gursky's. He would call himself an artist. On his website, he calls himself an artist. And he's done amazing images, such as Rhine from 1996 and Rhine 2 from 1999. And in 2014, Rhine 2 sold for over $4 million, which is mental for the fact that it is literally just a picture of some grass, water, and sky. But that is a brilliant tax write-off. Ask the person that bought it. And the third photographer that I would cover under the fine art photography category would be Gregory Crewdson. And his work is on another level of production value. He goes out with everything. His shoots are like movie sets, all for this one image, the one image that has to be perfect. Everything within the frame is done purposely. Be that the ray of light shining down in one of his twilight photos, and every single light in the houses, all turned on perfectly. Everything's turned to the right level. Nothing goes over what it should be in the frame. Another good quote by Susan Sontag fits in this style of photography well. She's comparing painters to photographers. And the quote says, "The painter constructs, the photographer discloses." But this is where I would argue, why can a photographer not construct? Why is the painter the one that constructs throughout all of this? Because as we can see, everything here is constructed. It's all purposeful. It's all got meaning behind it. It's not just, like at the start, somebody taking a snapshot on their phone. It's art. And what really makes it more different than art? Why is photography different from art? That's the question that I still haven't managed to understand throughout all this. Is why is it seen as something different? What truly makes photography not art? And to conclude all of this, photography, even from the beginning, has been integral to society. The influence that has come from it through its short lifespan has been integral to how we live not only today, but also throughout its short history. It has influenced and changed regimes. It's been forcing itself to become recognised as an art form and another way of expressing and exploring new boundaries. It's constantly changing with new ways and means to be incorporated into modern art. It's being used by artists around the world to document their work and to be incorporated into their work. There is so much more that can be spoken about when it comes to photography, and 15 minutes is not long enough to even scratch the surface. But to go back to some of the things I've talked about, people like Edward Steichen to Gregory Crewdson bring something new with every new generation when it comes to photography. They all bring something new to the table. A new way of working, a new idea of working. And they all follow the same ways of, it's not about just capturing that moment in time, it's creating something more and something that makes you think and feel. Which, is it not the idea of art itself, is to create something and have meaning within it that people can understand. In summary though, not all photography is art. And we need to understand that there's something that connects the two, incorporating and intertwining them. This is why photography is art. It's more than just taking photographs. All images used within this video have been lawfully used under YouTube's fair use policy and guidelines. No legal action can be taken against me.